murder, but a specific type of murder. The jurists, both classical and modern, have a special category for violence that is done in order to destabilize a society and to cause general sense of fear among the population. And it could include actually taking someone's life or just threatening to take people's lives. So it's where terrorism would fit in. And this is a category that is called hiraba, and hiraba is different from jihad. Jihad is carried out by a state in an organized fashion. There has to be a declaration. There has to be a likelihood of success, because if there's not a likelihood of success, then you're just going to embroil people in kind of internecine fighting for a long period of time with high number of casualties. And so there are all these rules in place. If you do not have those rules, if you do not follow those rules, then it falls into another category. And just to give you a sense of how strong a crime hiraba is, the death penalty is only mentioned in the Quran for one crime, not for adultery, not for theft, not for even for murder, in the sense of, like, you know, one person gets mad at another person, beats them up in a bar, or that kind of stuff, manslaughter. And that death penalty is for hiraba. So if I were somebody who were contemplating a terrorist action, I would want to make very sure that I'm following the laws of jihad, which would of course make it impossible for me to do it. Because if I'm not, then I'm considered a muharib. And then on earth, if I were actually going to be tried by an Islamic court, I would probably get the death penalty with some you know, other nasty stuff thrown in. In terms of the other world, the Quran has a line that's similar to the line that's mentioned in the Mishnah that the rabbi brought up, which is that if you, it's actually the same line and perhaps maybe kind of echoing the same sentiment, that if one takes the life of a single individual unjustly, it's like taking the life of all mankind. And if you save the life of a single individual, then it's like enlivening all of humanity. And so the otherworldly punishment for unjustly taking a life are very grave. So although there is a possibility for repentance, certainly if you are killing yourself in the process, you're not going to live long enough to really go through much of a repentance. So that's kind of what the consequences would be.
It's become trendy, maybe importantly so, in recent decades to make apologies for past sins to Native Americans and African Americans and so on. Josiah Pearls, the father of Daniel Pearls, the Jewish journalist assassinated by the Taliban, recently said in Austin that his hope is that the heads of state of the Palestinians and the Israelis could publicly apologize to the other country for the suffering they have caused another indigenous, underlined, people of the same area of the Middle East. Do you see this as possible? How and when? And I guess I would add to that, or nuance that, is the concept of an apology fit anywhere in your tradition? Dr. Azam?
You would ask me first. The concept, okay, the original question between Palestinians and Israelis. I think there are peace activists on both sides. There are those who recognize that the path that has been followed up until this point is not really working all that effectively, and who are not proud of what their governmental authorities or governmental bodies are doing. So whether that would ever come from the leadership, probably not anytime soon, but individuals might express that. But the idea of an apology, you mean like in a war situation? Like we're sorry for, or is it more, do you mean like more of a personal, like I'm sorry I killed your son type of thing in the barroom brawl? Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, well, I would guess I could see it in two ways. In a personal situation, there are the community, there is a group in Israel and in Palestine of Israelis and Palestinians who have lost children or brothers or sisters, family members, and they have gotten together and worked together as a single community, all of who have experienced loss, to not just to apologize, but also to work for a greater peace. So I guess there's that personal response. But I think there's also a larger issue as to whether communities, whether they're governmental or not, ought to make apologies to other communities. And I don't know whether that relates to anything historically. That may be just a modern concept.
Well, I'll just say one thing, and this is answering one little tiny corner of the question. After September 11th, there were, one of the things that I heard all around, and I still hear it until today, is, how come other Muslims, all of you moderate Muslims, don't say something or, to condemn terrorism or the acts of September 11th. And closer to September 11th, the specific form of that is, how come we're not hearing any apologies by the Muslim community for this terrible thing that your fellow Muslims did? And that put those of us who were not involved in that action in a very odd situation of being asked to apologize for something that we hadn't done. And I think it may have been, it was really a catch-22, because if even those of us who understood the possible benefits of saying that apology were constantly caught up by what the implications of apologizing would be. And I think that overall Muslims did a lot of, there were lots of condemnations that were issued. But an apology is something that you do for something that you, is something that you say for something that you did. And I think that was very difficult for people to wrap their minds around, even though it was dissatisfying for those of us who would have, those Americans who would have liked that.
Yeah.
In the Christian tradition, we have the practices of asking and giving forgiveness, contrition, repentance. And therefore, at the personal level, I think they work well, they should be done, and they should be exercised. We recognize that in life there are moments of tragedy, that the only choices we have are to choose between two evils, and that we will engage in evil. And we recognize that sin abounds, and there's a lot of distortion out there, and that we participate in those. And therefore, there's there. At the level of collective apologies, I think it's more complicated, not impossible. I think we have seen manifestations of that. For example, at this point in history, the nation can apologize for what they did to Japanese Americans during the war. That's doable. They even can give them even financial compensation and other types of recognition. That's doable. What happened in 9/11 will probably take much longer till basically we get there. I don't think it will be impossible.